Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. Um, yeah, sad news to report today, guys. Um, on the death of WWE legend Pat Patterson. Um, yeah, Pat Patterson was most well known as the creative mind behind the golden era of the WWE in the 1980s. All those legendary matches that we saw with the Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, and even in the early to mid '90s with the Iron Man match, the matches with Shawn Michaels, just many eras, but mostly he helped, along with Bruce Pritchard and Vince McMahon, to book the wrestling golden era of the '80s. He was also the first Intercontinental Champion in 1979. And outside of the WWE and other promotions, particularly in the AWA and um, Roy Shire's San Francisco territory, he was a tag team legend. Alongside Ray the Crippler Stevens. And in AWA, he was a tag team legend alongside Nick Bockwinkel. But yeah, he's passed away. Now he also made history in his personal life as the first openly gay, one of the first openly gay professional wrestlers. Now, in the wrestling industry, it was well known that he was gay by the fans because he was he was fired in from WWE in 1992 for the first time because of the Ring Boy scandal, the sexual scandal that also got ring announcer Mel Phillips fired from the company, and Jimmy Garvin. Terry Garvin fired from the company. There was a scandal that they were having sex with underage boys, and he was fired from that. If you want to go look up an episode of the Phil Donahue show in '92, where Vince is on there, Dave Meltzer is on there, um, Randy Orton's uncle Barry O is on there, and another guy, and they're talking about how people like Pat Patterson would demand sexual favors from certain wrestlers for certain pushes and promotions. But he was never convicted, so we don't really know if that was true. In the late '90s, he was known as being one of the Stooges alongside Gerald Briscoe, part of Vince McMahon's heater group that the baby faces like Stone Cold Steve Austin uh, hey, would beat up on Patterson and Briscoe and before they got to Vince McMahon. So he did a little comic relief there. In 2014, on the show Legends House, he came out as gay officially to the audience. Um, and then he released this book. I forgot the name of it, but um, he released that book um, about his life. He also gave Brutus Beefcake his gimmick. Um, Patterson's um, Patterson's boyfriend or husband was a well-known hairstylist, so he gave Brutus Beefcake the gimmick of a hairstylist. But yeah, rest in peace to Pat Patterson. He was a wrestling legend. Um, some of my favorite matches to look back on him with was the one he had with Sergeant Slaughter in 1991. I mean, excuse me, 1981. Um, in Madison Square Garden, a match where there was no, nah, the Booty Man, no, that was WCW. I'm talking about the barber gimmick. The barber gimmick. Nah, the Booty Man, that was WCW. Yeah, that was Ed Leslie's gimmick in WCW when he turned a babyface again in '96. But I guess Patterson was the original Booty Man, right? They even before he came out as gay on Legends House, they would always they would always make these little slide like JR would say, like, oh, he's single, guys. You, you, they would always allude to the fact that people knew that he was gay. It was an open secret. It wasn't something that a lot of smart fans didn't know about. you know, like when he finally did come out as gay on Legends House, it was like, yeah, like we knew you were gay from the beginning. You know, it was sort of like when they finally revealed that wrestling was not, was predetermined. It was like, yeah, well, we kind of knew that already. Like, duh. Yeah, so anyway, rest in peace to Pat Patterson, first Intercontinental Champion. Never could really pronounce his S's in words. That was a famous gag on him. I look forward to Bruce Pritchard show this Friday, something to wrestle with Conrad, because Pritchard and Patterson work close together in booking WWE. Peace. And what Gerald Briscoe has to say, what a year for the Stooges. One passes away and one gets fired. Um, no, not really, not anymore. I used to be a WWE fanatic fan for many years. Ruthless Aggression era, Golden era, even New Generation era. And every week, I catch the pay-per-views and I catch, big WrestleManias and big SummerSlams. But no, not really. I don't. Yeah, Cody has that lisps, like his dad. Cody sounds a lot like his dad. Yeah, what do you guys think of AEW? Tribute to the troops? That's cool. Nothing really happens in that, but uh, I get, my thing was my favorite was back in the day, superstars. Yeah, they need more storylines. Yeah, you're right. They need more storylines. Like John Moxley is like the only big John Moxley, Cody Rhodes, and Kenny Omega, like the only big stars they have. And those guys were made in other promotions. Kenny Omega was made in New Japan. Cody was made in WWE, and John Moxley was made in WWE as well. You know what I mean? So they need um they need other stars that are homegrown. Like even TNA, as shitty as they were in the 2000s, they had Samoa Joe, they had AJ Styles, they had you know guys that were their big names. WCW too had DDP, Sting, Goldberg, you know, homegrown names. AEW really doesn't like they have Marco Stunt and shitty people like that. But yeah, but they need that they need two more storylines. But it's been kind of hard with for them because it's like they just started getting their brand off the ground. Yeah, yeah. Because he watches a lot of, I think he watches a lot of lucha libre stuff, and a lot of lucha libre does that. You know, a lot of lucha libre has like tornado tag matches and everything, but they don't do traditional tag matches like we do here in the United States. It worked for Nitro to have the lucha styles and the Japanese styles, but they always had the American guys mixed in as well. You got to have a balance between. And Tony Khan is just he caters to just the smart mark fan base, but you can't really do that when you're not an established brand. You got to get your brand name out to as many people as possible. So if you just cater to the smart fans, then you're never going to really build a base unless you're selling just DVDs like RH used to do, or you're on late at night cable access network like ECW used to do in the 90s. You know, but they're trying to establish themselves as a big number two, like how TNA and WCW were. Yeah, it is. Like they're trying to establish themselves as a big um, brand like WCW and RH. I mean WCW and TNA were, but you can't do that unless you have some of the bigger names. And Jericho is not. Yeah, I never even heard of that guy. I do wrestling stuff, like when somebody really dies, or I do a couple of big pay per views, but I focus more on other topics. A lot of people are in just, that YWC framework. The golden era of the YWC is pretty much not non-existent anymore. I remember in the old days on YouTube, Wrestling Jesus and all those guys, Spinner Net One, and back in the late 2000s. It was weird then because it was like we didn't really have much to talk about in terms of wrestling. Wrestling wasn't. Yeah. Alrighty. 10 reasons why WWE fucking sucks. We didn't really have much to talk about in those days. It wasn't no NXT. There was no um the revamped ECW that WWE brought back was complete shit. But people people made their own personalities like Crazy Mike 06 and those guys. You know what I mean? And they thrived off their own personality. But now that there's even more wrestling and wrestling pay per views like New Japan's pay per view Wrestle Kingdom and stuff and WrestleMania are like 4 or 5 hours long, people just aren't interested in it anymore as they were even then. MMA kind of stepped in and took over wrestling's fan base too. Now people are more into like the podcast that the wrestlers themselves do, like Pritchard and Jim Cornette and, and those types. People are more into hearing about wrestling than actually seeing wrestling, which is weird. Like the guys in the indie scene in Japan and stuff, they say, "Oh, well, wrestling is coming back. How it's making a renaissance?" No, it's not. Yeah, Raw is 3 hours and hardly anybody watches the whole 3 hours of Raw. SmackDown, few people watch that because of the booking, because of storytelling, and that brings it back to the original point of the video. It's Patterson. Patterson's like you watch any wrestling shoot interview. Yeah, you watch any wrestling shoot interview. They say that Pat Patterson was the best mind in the business for finishes, logical finishes that made sense. Now they don't have that because it's like, how can you really have a finish of a feud when you got to go into the next pay per view the next month and have the exact same feud again? It's like Triple H fought Batista at WrestleMania 21, and then he continued to fight Batista again for the next 5 months. So how big was really their WrestleMania match? It didn't mean as much, and they have even that problem even more so now. And now they love their real indie darlings, the Keith Lees of the world and stuff, and the guys like that. Just really with no personalities, they don't really stick out. That's really made. That's what makes any form of entertainment is the personalities, the people involved. And all the wrestlers today are all cookie cutter. They all look the same. They cut the same promos, and especially in WWE, but even in AEW, same thing. In AEW, like the guy said, too many tag matches, not enough emphasis on one-on-one action. you know, it's like you want to try to cram as many people on the card as possible by having these crazy tag matches, these 4-on-4 matches or 3-on-3s. Yeah, yeah, he was. That was WrestleMania 12. But then he married Stephanie McMahon. Well, thing is, Triple H, his one talent in life is not wrestling. It's not cutting promos either. His talent in life is knowing who to associate himself with and when. Because when he first got into WWE, he associated himself with Kevin Nash, Shawn Michaels, The Click, and then he rose to prominence that way. And then he associated himself with Vince McMahon and Vince McMahon's family by marrying Stephanie McMahon. And now he's set to inherit the company whenever Vince does not die because Vince's son, Shane, is not even interested in wrestling anymore. So, so that's just one talent in life. And his greatest talent, and the other is imitating Ric Flair. And he's pretty creative with NXT, but I don't know. Like when the biggest thing fans are talking about in professional wrestling is AEW, an organization that's existed for 1 year, and the developmental brand of WWE, the entire sport slash form of entertainment is in trouble. Because streaming service, you could say, they say, well, because people watch differently, people watch on Hulu, and because of streaming services. But WWE was ahead of the curve in streaming services. They came out with their streaming service in 2014, before Disney Plus, before Peacock, before a lot of these streaming services, before Netflix really even had live original content that much. So they can't really blame it on streaming services. People just stopped watching really after WCW went out of business. After WCW and ECW, people really stopped watching. It was gradual. Like the the Ruthless Aggression era still had a lot of viewers, but they started to fall off little by little, year by year, would be less and less until we're here in 2020, where almost nobody watches and people talk more about the past, and past nostalgia videos get more views than actual videos that are talking about the current product. And the focus on the smaller guys, the indie guys, the women, turned a lot of people off. Just like other forms of media, the pushing constantly of social agendas turned a lot of people off. Like with the Patterson thing, yeah, people knew he was gay for years, but they didn't really make it an issue until it was vogue to make it an issue. You know what I mean? Like when it became a social justice warrior type issue to make it that he was gay and really put it out there, that's when they did it. Fans knew about it and fans were okay with it. You know what I mean? It's like whatever, it's his life. You know, you know what I mean? But constantly pushing and pushing, they push their fans away. People don't want to see all this messaging, this social messaging in wrestling shows. That's just how WWE felt aside. And other companies never really got off the ground. Like this guy just said, 1 million viewers last October, but that's nothing compared to what, Nitro and Raw used to average in the 90s. You know, in the 80s and 90s, wrestling was really part of the culture, especially in the 90s. It was part of mainstream culture on cable TV. It was really what defined really cable TV. At least the basic channels was defined by wrestling on Monday nights. They didn't want to admit it, especially TNT, Turner's properties, because they never wanted to be associated with wrestling. But it was what defined. It was got the highest ratings ever for that channel. But WCW went out of business, and then WWE started to make the same mistakes that WCW made. Yeah, yeah, like they want to cater to the indie marks that don't care how people look or whatever. Okay, you cater to the indie marks, But why though? You already have your indie fans. Wrestling indie fans that are wrestling fanatics are gonna watch. They're gonna watch wrestling regardless of who is on there. You could put anybody on there. You could put one of them on there and they'll watch it anyway. Could they watch it because it's wrestling? They don't care who's really wrestling. They'll watch any kind of wrestling that's on there because they're wrestling fans, hardcore fans. But when you want to get a casual audience viewer, you gotta they gotta look like wrestlers. People in people's minds associate a certain look with a wrestler, just like any other sport or entertainment, or anything in life. If you go out to buy a car and it doesn't look like an impressive car, you're not gonna want to buy it, you know, even if it runs great. People say, oh, well, these smaller, out of shape guys are really great wrestlers. Yeah, but they don't catch the viewer's attention in the same way. Marco Stunt and all these guys. Orange Cassidy. The Orange Cassidy thing with the kicks. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the Orange Cassidy thing with the suntan lotion in hell, huh? Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if the pedophile rumors are to be believed, then yeah, he is going to go to hell. You know what I mean? So, I mean, Daniel, that's your opinion. Yeah, exactly. But you know, yeah, you're not going to be interested. You're not going to want to. You're not going to want to give that a second view. You know what I mean? Click, and now. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was going to mention that. You're right, Daniel. Yeah, exactly. Patterson. There is an interview with Sean Oliver, kayfabe commentaries that Piper did, and he doesn't actually say that Patterson did anything to him sexually, but he heavily alludes to it. You're right, Daniel. I would recommend to watch that. You know what I mean? Like, and the guy who reported Patterson told TMZ that Patterson died. Mike Moonaham has a book, Sex, Lies, and Headlocks, that really exposes uh, Patterson and those guys, for what they were doing. Hell, Vince McMahon even was accused of raping somebody. Yep, yep. Wrestling does have a lot of shady individuals. There are more actual real life heels in wrestling than there are real life, actual good people, baby faces. We admire them for the talent in there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do remember him. He was one of my favorite wrestlers growing up as a kid. Um, the feud he had with Brett in 1994, which, according to Bruce Pritchard, was a Pat Patterson idea too. Um, and the stuff with um, Shawn Michaels in '96, and yeah, when he died, that really watched the what Jason watched the Dark Side of the Ring featuring about his life, featuring Owen Hart about Owen's life, and it's really tragic because it could have been prevented. They wanted him to go up there as the Blue Blazer, all because he didn't want to do a storyline where he was having an affair with Deborah, in a love triangle with Jeff Jarrett. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't blame his wife. Like Martha, for years, fans were upset with Martha Hart, his wife, for not wanting to put him in the Hall of Fame. But that's completely understandable because why would you allow WWE to profit off of the death of your husband? I say Brett shouldn't even went in. Brett should have stood on principle and not gone in, but he was more concerned with what happened to him in the Montreal screw job than he was with his brother's death, really. I would have, were it my brother, I would have stood on principle and said, "You're not going to profit off me, my dad, or anybody in the family by making DVDs, making network specials when my brother's death could have been avoided." The fact that Brett not only went in their Hall of Fame in 2006, but also worked with them at WrestleMania 26 in 2010 was completely shitty on Brett's part. I feel he should have took a stand like Martha is and not allow WWE to profit off the death of. Um, yeah, yeah, Daniel, you're absolutely right. People forget, like it's just like the Benoit apologist. People say, "Oh well, Benoit was a great wrestler," but so what? Like people think being a great quote unquote wrestler is the be all end all. Uh, of life. You know what I mean? Like these are human beings at the end of the day. And Owen was in an unsafe work environment, but no, all they care about is him being inducted into a fake Hall of Fame that not that there's no even building for the Hall of Fame. It just doesn't. Yeah, I know. Yeah, but like people, I'm saying, Daniel, I'm saying people that want him inducted into the Hall of Fame. There are actually people out there that want him inducted into the Hall of Fame. Me personally, I don't. Yeah, yeah, I know. Because of the closeness, there needs to be a book written specifically about that. You know what I mean? Like, and then you have the conspiracy theorists that think that Kevin Sullivan murdered Benoit and Nancy Sullivan. It's like, no, that didn't happen. Like, you know, like with Patterson, I want to do the video on Patterson, but to be an apologist for the alleged, the behavior of Patterson for what he did to those kids, you can't. I mean, you can honor him as a booker, as a talent in wrestling for what he did as a wrestler, but not to say that he was a good human being, a good person. No, you know, for what he was accused of. So the same with Benoit, the same with all the. Yeah, it is. Daniel, I saw that promo. I saw that. Of course, he worked closely with Chris and knew Chris pretty well. In his podcast, he's very reserved. Like, I wish Arn would open up more about certain things, but that's just how Arn is. But Benoit followed a similar path to Dynamite Kid. But you got to think, Eddie, it's like WWE put so much pressure on Chris and Eddie for to be big and to make up for their lack of size, that it cost them their lives. Like Eddie Guerrero was literally dying to be in the main event. Yeah. And like I always feared that it would happen to Daniel Bryan too, that something really tragic would happen to Daniel Bryan when they let him come back. Vince doesn't really care about these people as people. Like Vince and the hardcore wrestling fans' attitude is very similar. Well, as long as they provide me entertainment, that's all I really care about. You know, if that's the fans' point of view, and Vince's is like, as long as they bring in money, who really cares about them as people? You know, like I spoke about this. Andrew Yang putting the pressure on um, Vince McMahon for a union, and more safe work environment is exactly what WWE needs. Some kind of outside pressure on them. Because Vince admits he's like, oh, I don't really care about these guys. In so many words and different words. Certain guys, have gone into rehab a lot, like Scott Hall, and certain guys get protection, but certain other guys don't. And really, Scott Hall really didn't uh, generate a lot of income all that much in WWE.
Somebody took your shit on the fifth floor in the garbage room.
Oh wow.
Okay? That goes to place